Curtis knew his marriage was already bleeding out long before Portia finally admitted there was something she hadn't told him. But hearing the truth still landed like a physical blow. It wasn't just that she had been unfaithful, it was that the betrayal had been methodical, wrapped in half-truths, smiles, and a carefully curated image of a woman asking for patience while hiding a bomb under their shared life. Curtis stood in the aftermath of her confession with the sickening realization that nothing between them felt solid anymore. Not their vows, not their future, and not even the child Portia was carrying. Portia's pregnancy should have been a moment of grounding hope, something that anchored them during a rough patch. Instead, it became the epicenter of their collapse. Her affair with Isaiah wasn't a reckless one-night mistake that could be boxed away as momentary weakness. It was sustained, emotional, and intimate enough to make the question of paternity unavoidable. Curtis didn't want to be cruel, but he also refused to be innocent. The uncertainty gnawed at him every hour of the day, turning love into suspicion and tenderness into resentment. Every time Portia placed a hand on her stomach, Curtis felt the same question rising in his chest. Whose child is that really? Curtis pushed for a DNA test not because he wanted to punish Portia, but because he needed the truth to survive what came next. Living in limbo was destroying him. Portia resisted at first, hiding behind fear, timing, and vague pleas for trust. But Curtis had already given trust freely, repeatedly, and disastrously. Her reluctance only sharpened his doubts, and the distance between them grew colder by the day. Their home felt less like a sanctuary and more like a courtroom where every conversation carried the weight of accusation. As Portia stalled and deflected, Curtis found himself drifting somewhere he hadn't expected, back toward Jordan. She was supposed to be his past, a chapter closed and catalogued under what might have been. Jordan was his ex-wife, the woman he once believed he would grow old with before life. Ambition and pain pulled them apart. Their recent closeness hadn't started with intention. It began with conversations that felt easy, with shared looks that carried understanding instead of judgment. Jordan listened without trying to fix him, without asking him to soften the truth for her comfort. With her, Curtis didn't feel like a defendant fighting to prove his innocence. He felt like a man allowed to be broken. Jordan knew she was walking a dangerous line. She was fully aware of Curtis's marital situation, of Portia's pregnancy, and of the mess that surrounded him. Yet history has a way of resurfacing when emotional walls are already cracked. Old habits returned quietly, late nights talking, hands brushing, memories resurfacing with a vividness that felt almost cruel. Curtis didn't plan to end up back in Jordan's bed, but when it happened, it felt less like a choice and more like gravity reclaiming its pull. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Curtis was demanding the truth from his wife while seeking solace in the arms of the woman he once loved. Guilt flickered through him, but it never quite took hold. In his mind, Portia had already broken the marriage. What he shared with Jordan felt honest in a way his current relationship no longer did. Still, honesty didn't mean safety, and consequences have a way of arriving whether invited or not. Jordan tried to keep herself grounded in reality. She reminded herself that what happened with Curtis might be temporary, a response to stress and unresolved emotions rather than a promise of a shared future. She had rebuilt her life after their divorce with deliberate care, choosing independence over chaos. Motherhood wasn't part of her plan, not now. Not when she was finally steady on her own feet. Yet life has never been interested in respecting carefully drawn plans. The possibility that Jordan might be pregnant crept in quietly, first as a dismissed thought, then as a persistent fear. At first, she told herself she was overthinking it, that stress could explain the changes in her body. But denial only works for so long. When the truth became impossible to ignore, Jordan felt trapped between panic and inevitability. A child with Curtis would tie her to him permanently, reopening wounds she had worked so hard to heal. And yet, there was no escaping what such a life would mean. Curtis, meanwhile, remained focused on forcing clarity out of Portia. The DNA test became his line in the sand. Without it, there would be no rebuilding, no pretending they could simply move forward. Portia sensed the noose tightening and grew more defensive, more desperate. If Curtis truly was the father, confirming it might secure her marriage, but it would also expose her lies in ways she couldn't control. And if Isaiah was the father, everything would implode. The situation turned volatile when the timelines began to overlap in Curtis's mind. If Jordan was indeed pregnant, and if Portia's test confirmed Curtis as the father, he would be facing an impossible reality: 2 women carrying his children at the same time. Each pregnancy born out of emotional chaos and broken trust. The thought made his head spin, but beneath the fear was a startling realization. Curtis wanted the child Jordan might be carrying. The idea of starting fresh, of doing something right from the beginning, tempted him in ways he hadn't expected. Jordan didn't share that optimism. To her, the pregnancy felt like a reckoning rather than a gift. She knew the truth would have to come out eventually, and the longer she waited, the more devastating it would be for everyone involved. She also knew Portia wouldn't stay silent forever. If Portia announced that Curtis was the father of her baby, Jordan's own secret would be dragged into the light whether she was ready or not. The looming battle wasn't just between Portia and Jordan, it was within Curtis himself. Every choice he made now carried collateral damage. Protecting one truth meant exposing another lie. Loving one woman meant hurting the other. And through it all stood Trina, the daughter Curtis shared with Portia, unknowingly positioned at the center of a storm she didn't create. For Trina, the idea of new siblings sparked conflicting emotions. Part of her was genuinely excited. She had always imagined having brothers or sisters, someone to share her family with as life moved forward. But excitement quickly tangled with anxiety when she realized how complicated the situation truly was. At least one of these children would share her father, but not her mother. And that reality forced Trina to confront how fractured her family had become. Trina's confusion deepened as she began to sense the tension between her parents. She noticed the sharpness in Curtis's voice, the way Portia avoided direct answers, the heaviness that settled over rooms when certain topics came up. Though no one spelled it out for her, Trina felt the instability pressing in from all sides. She loved her mother, trusted her, and yet something didn't add up. Portia's insistence that Curtis was the father of her baby felt less like certainty and more like desperation. The possibility that Portia might be lying, claiming Curtis as the father when Isaiah was the truth, introduced a moral fracture that went beyond marriage. It threatened to redefine Trina's understanding of honesty, loyalty, and family. If her mother could lie about something this monumental, what else had been hidden in the name of preservation? Curtis found himself torn between protecting his daughter and demanding accountability from her mother. He wanted to shield Trina from adult mistakes, but the reality was that those mistakes were already shaping her future. Whether Curtis ended up with 2 newborns or none, whether Portia's child was his or Isaiah's, Trina's world was about to change irrevocably. As secrets stacked on top of secrets, the pressure became unbearable. Jordan stood on the edge of confession, knowing that silence was no longer an option. Portia hovered between doubling down on her story and finally admitting the truth about Isaiah. Curtis, caught in the middle, felt the ground shifting beneath him, aware that any revelation, any test result, any confession could trigger a chain reaction that none of them would be able to stop. And as the timing of pregnancies, betrayals, and half-truths began to collide, it became clear that the question was no longer just who the father was, but how much damage the truth would inflict once it finally refused to stay buried. The truth finally began to move on its own, no longer waiting for permission from anyone involved. Curtis felt it in the way Portia could no longer meet his eyes, and in the way Jordan's silence had grown heavier than any confession. Everything that had been hidden was pressing forward at the same time, demanding air, demanding consequence. There was no version of the future anymore where this ended quietly. Portia was the first to break. The DNA test that Curtis had insisted on was scheduled, unavoidable now, and the waiting became unbearable for her. Each day that passed tightened the fear in her chest. She told herself again and again that claiming Curtis as the father was not a lie but a necessity. If the child was Isaiah's, admitting it would cost her marriage, her reputation, and possibly her relationship with her daughter. If Curtis was the father, then all of her resistance would seem foolish and cruel. In her mind, the risk felt worth taking. But lies rot from the inside. Portia found herself snapping at Trina over small things and bristling whenever Curtis asked even the simplest question. She began rehearsing explanations that contradicted each other, unable to settle on a single version of the truth. Somewhere deep inside, she knew she was already losing everything. She just did not know yet which loss would hurt the most. Curtis watched her unravel with a strange mixture of anger and pity. The woman he had once trusted with his life now felt like a stranger performing a role she could no longer remember how to play. He stopped arguing and stopped pleading. Instead, he became quiet. That silence frightened Portia more than his anger ever had, because it told her he was already preparing for a life without her. Jordan, meanwhile, was fighting a different kind of battle. She confirmed what she already feared. She was pregnant. The reality settled into her bones with a weight she had not expected. It was not just the fear of motherhood or the timing or the inevitable fallout. It was the certainty that Curtis would want this child in a way that would bind them together again whether she liked it or not. Jordan did not tell Curtis right away. She needed time to think, to understand what she wanted before his feelings complicated everything. But time was not on her side. Rumors had a way of spreading in Port Charles, and Curtis and Jordan were already being noticed together again. The moment Portia sensed even a hint of betrayal beyond her own, the balance would shatter. That moment came sooner than Jordan hoped. Trina, perceptive and emotionally exhausted, confronted Curtis one evening when she could no longer pretend everything was fine. She asked him directly if her parents were going to separate. Curtis did not lie. He told her that things were complicated and that adults sometimes make choices that hurt people they love. Trina listened quietly, then asked the question he had been dreading. She asked if the baby was really his. Curtis told her the truth. He said he did not know yet. The words felt brutal but honest. Trina absorbed them with a maturity that broke his heart. She admitted that she had been sensing something was wrong for weeks. She also admitted that she was afraid. Not of new siblings, but of being forced to choose sides in a war she did not start. That conversation hardened Curtis's resolve. No matter how painful the truth was, it had to come out before it poisoned his relationship with his daughter beyond repair. He confronted Portia again, not with accusations this time, but with finality. He told her that the DNA test would happen, and that whatever the result was, he would accept it. What he would not accept was any more deception. Cornered, Portia cracked. She did not confess everything. Not yet. But her reaction told Curtis enough. The panic in her eyes confirmed what his instincts had been screaming all along. There was a real possibility that Isaiah was the father. Curtis left that conversation knowing that his marriage was already over in every way that mattered. The fallout reached Jordan when Portia, desperate and angry, sought her out. The confrontation was raw and ugly. Portia accused Jordan of waiting in the shadows, of circling Curtis like a memory he could not escape. Jordan did not deny sleeping with him. She did not apologize either. Instead, she told Portia something that shifted the entire dynamic. She told her she was pregnant. The silence that followed was devastating. Portia laughed at first, sharp and disbelieving. Then the reality set in. 2 pregnancies. One man, one timeline that overlapped just enough to destroy everyone involved. Portia realized in that moment that her plan to secure Curtis by claiming him as the father no longer gave her leverage. It gave her competition. Jordan walked away from that encounter shaken but resolute. There was no hiding now. Curtis deserved to know. Trina deserved clarity, and Jordan deserved the chance to choose her own future without being driven by fear. She told Curtis that night. Curtis did not react the way she expected. He did not panic or accuse her of manipulation. He sat down and listened. When she finished, he closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like surrender. He admitted that part of him was relieved. The child growing inside Jordan felt like a chance to build something honest, something not born from betrayal. He told her he wanted to be involved. Fully. Publicly. Jordan did not give him an answer right away. She told him she needed time. Not to decide whether she wanted the baby, but to decide what kind of life she wanted for herself and her child. Curtis respected that. For the first time in months, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. The DNA results arrived soon after, and they changed everything. Curtis was not the father of Portia's baby. Isaiah was. The confirmation was swift and merciless. Portia's lie collapsed instantly, taking her credibility with it. Curtis felt grief, but also relief. The uncertainty was over. The marriage was truly finished now, not because of another woman, but because of a truth Portia had refused to face. Trina's reaction was complex. She was hurt by her mother's dishonesty, but also compassionate. She understood that fear had driven Portia's choices, even if she could not excuse them. Learning that she would not share a biological father with the baby brought unexpected clarity. It simplified emotions that had felt overwhelming. Still, she mourned the family she thought she had. Portia faced consequences she could not outrun. Curtis moved out, choosing distance over daily conflict. Isaiah stepped forward, forced to confront his own responsibility. Portia was left to rebuild not just her future, but her relationship with her daughter, now strained by betrayal and disappointment. As Portia's world shrank, Curtis's began to reconfigure itself. His bond with Trina deepened as they navigated the changes together. He remained present for Portia's child in the ways that mattered, determined not to repeat patterns of abandonment, even when biology did not bind him. Jordan eventually made her choice. She decided to keep the baby, not because of Curtis, but because she realized she wanted this child on her own terms. She told Curtis he could be part of their lives if he accepted that this was not a reunion of the past, but the creation of something entirely new. Curtis agreed without hesitation. Their relationship evolved slowly, built on transparency and mutual respect rather than nostalgia. They faced judgment from the outside world and skepticism from those who remembered how they ended before. But this time, they were different people. Wiser, more cautious, more honest. When Jordan finally told Trina about the pregnancy, the moment was tender and awkward and sincere. Trina admitted she did not know how she felt yet, but she appreciated being told the truth directly. That honesty became the foundation of their bond. Trina stepped into her role as an older sister cautiously, learning that family does not have to follow a single blueprint to be real. The birth of Jordan's child arrived quietly, without scandal or spectacle. Curtis held his newborn with a sense of awe and responsibility that felt earned rather than assumed. In that moment, he understood that redemption was not about erasing the past, but about choosing better in the present. Portia watched from a distance, grappling with regret and acceptance. Her journey was far from over, but the lies were behind her now. She faced the future with fewer illusions and a deeper understanding of the cost of fear. In the end, nothing turned out the way any of them once imagined. But from the wreckage of broken trust and exposed truths, something steadier emerged. Curtis did not get a perfect life, but he gained an honest one. Jordan reclaimed her agency. Trina learned resilience. And the next generation was born into a story shaped not by secrets, but by hard-won truth.